Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a highly concentrated, honestly incredibly powerful philosophy all about protecting your mindset. We're looking at a framework known simply as the Architecture of Selective Influence. We often think about our diets, right? Or our physical training, maybe our financial budgets, and we apply an intense amount of rigor to those things. But how often do we apply that exact same strict, unyielding rigor to the voices we actually allow into our heads? The source material we're examining today is remarkably brief. Literally, it's just 2 sentences. But within those 2 sentences lies an entire system for totally auditing your reality.
So I want you to ask yourself, who holds the power of influence in your life? Seriously, take a second right now. Think about your daily routine. Think about the audio you listen to during your commute, the social media feeds you're constantly scrolling through, the colleagues you grab a quick coffee with, or the friends you text. Every single one of those interactions is an exchange of influence. So who currently has access to your mind? Are they there by your conscious choice? Or are they there simply out of habit, proximity, or maybe just politeness? What we're about to look at today strips away all that politeness of everyday socialization. It sets the stage for a rather stark, almost ruthless evaluation of our daily inputs.
Before we get to the core rules, we really need to define our terms. Architecture. In this context, when we talk about the architecture of selective influence, we're talking about intentional design. Think about it. An architect doesn't just throw a bunch of bricks into a pile and hope a house suddenly forms, right? They design the foundation, they meticulously build the load-bearing walls, and most importantly, they install doors with locks. Influence should absolutely never be accidental. I mean, we've all had that moment where we get sucked into a coworker's 20-minute complaining session by the water cooler, and suddenly our entire afternoon just feels entirely drained. Your mindset is an environment, and this philosophy demands the intentional design and strict structuring of your personal influences and boundaries. You literally have to build the walls before you can decide who gets to walk through the front door.
And that brings us right to filter 1, the boundary. So this is the first half of a binary filter system found in our source text. You can really think of this as the defensive mechanism of the philosophy. It's the shield. It's the mechanism that stops the bleeding and prevents any contamination from entering your structured architecture. Listen to this direct excerpt from the source. I don't listen to these people. I will not listen to people who have something that I don't want in my life. Just listen to the definitive tone there. It doesn't say, I try not to listen or I limit my exposure. No, it says, I will not listen. It is an uncompromising rejection. And that's a profound shift in how we usually handle advice or influence. Usually, if someone is talking to us, we just naturally feel obligated to listen. But this rule grants you the permission, actually scratch that, it's a mandate, to completely shut off the valve if the person speaking embodies negative elements you are actively trying to avoid.
Let's really zero in on this specific phrase from that quote, have something that I don't want. This is where the rubber meets the road. This acts as an absolute, non-negotiable boundary. If a person carries a trait, a habit, a toxic mindset, or even a life outcome that you actively despise or wish to avoid, their voice is nullified. Period. If they are constantly complaining and you want a life of optimism, well, they have something you don't want. If they're financially reckless, say they're giving you cryptocurrency tips while they're drowning in credit card debt and you want stability, they have something you don't want. Their input is immediately disqualified from your architectural design.
Which forces us to pause and ask this absolutely critical question. Are you letting the unwanted through the gates? Are you passively absorbing media, or maybe hanging on to relationships with people who are carrying the very traits you actively dislike? We so often think we're somehow immune to the negativity of others, that we can just ignore the bad parts, right? But this philosophy argues otherwise. It argues that exposure is influence.
Moving on to filter 2, the standard. If filter 1 was your defense, filter 2 is your offense. Once you've actually built the boundary to keep the unwanted out, you have to establish a strict, mandatory requirement for who actually gets to come in and gain access to your attention. And here is the second rule, again straight from the source text, I will not listen to people who don't have something that I want in my life. This is incredibly powerful, because just being a nice person isn't enough to get through the filter. Just being devoid of terrible traits, still not enough. Simply avoiding bad influences doesn't automatically build a strong architecture. You have to proactively demand excellence from the voices you allow inside your head.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this specific phrase right here, don't have something that I want. This means an influence must possess a desired outcome, a skill, a mindset, or a verifiable success in order to be permitted entry. If you want to build a successful business, you only listen to those who have built a successful business, or at the very least possess the verifiable skills required for it. They must hold a piece of the reality you are trying to construct for yourself. If they lack the desired trait, their voice is effectively silenced in your architecture.
And this brilliantly illustrates the complete, uncompromising nature of this system. On the left side, you reject people who have something you don't want. On the right side, you reject people who don't have something you do want. It is a perfect, flawless binary filter of selective influence. There's just no middle ground here. You are either bringing something actively detrimental to the table, or you're lacking the positive things I require. In either case, access is denied.
So let's bring it all together. Architecting your mind, the synthesis. How do we take these two aggressive, incredibly uncompromising sentences from the source material and turn them into a unified, practical system? A system for managing our daily lives, our personal networks, and our media diets. Well, the crucial point is right here in this simple two-step checklist. This is the absolute gravity of the source text distilled into pure action. Step 1. Reject those with what you do not want. Step 2. Demand those with what you do want. This is how you apply it today. When you turn on the TV, when you open an app on your phone, when you sit down for a meeting, run the voices through this two-step gauntlet. It is astonishingly simple on paper, yet incredibly difficult to actually execute, mostly because it requires you to be completely unapologetic about protecting your attention.
To summarize the harsh reality of this philosophy, constantly ask yourself, do they carry the unwanted? Do they lack the desired? It is an unyielding binary choice. The source material leaves absolutely no room for neutral, passive consumption. There are zero gray areas in who you listen to. A voice is either actively constructing your desired reality, or it's a liability. That's it. It is a very strict standard for sure, but if you want an intentionally designed life, you have to be the architect of your influences. So I want to leave you with this final, hard-hitting question. Based on these two exact rules, rejecting those who have what you don't want and ignoring those who lack what you do want, who currently has access to your mind? I highly encourage you to ruthlessly audit your own circle of influence today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy architecting.